The sky over southern New Mexico shimmered with late morning heat, a thin haze rolling across the high-altitude airspace above the white sands. Missile range? Captain Elena Monroe leveled her F-22A Raptor at 34,000 feet, her gloved hand steady on the HOTAS throttle, the muted hum of the jet's engines beneath her as familiar as her own breath. To her left, sunlight danced across the matte titanium skin of her aircraft. She had flown this airframe for years, but something about this sortie sat wrong in her gut. The radio crackled in her helmet. Whitmore's voice came through clear and clipped. Raptor 1. Proceed to intercept unidentified aircraft at grid coordinates 17 Alpha Delta. Rules of engagement are standard. Acknowledge. Elena clicked her comms. Raptor 1 copies. Intercepting now. She didn't bother asking why there was a bogey inside restricted airspace over. A weapons testing corridor. If it were just a weather balloon or a civilian lost off course, Command wouldn't have scrambled her in full afterburner with live ordnance. She tapped the MFD. No transponder signal. No flight plan registered with ATC. Altitude matched hers almost exactly. Velocity holding steady. No deviation in course. Whoever was up here either didn't know they were trespassing or didn't care. To her right, Raptor 2 pulled into position. Lieutenant Kyle Reeves, her wingman, called in. Visual acquired. Aircraft type unknown. No IFF return. No external markings. Elena's jaw clenched. Her oxygen mask hissed with each breath. She didn't like ghost contacts, and she hated missions with vague intel even more. This wasn't just a drill. Whitmore had told her that twice. It was the way he said it that stuck with her. No sarcasm. No edge. Just hard and cold. She adjusted her angle, the F-22 responding with smooth precision. Within seconds, she had visual. The unidentified aircraft was flying clean, straight, and level. The body was charcoal gray, matte-coated, with angles that didn't match anything she'd seen in training or in the restricted aircraft manuals she'd browsed under classified conditions. No wing insignia, no tail numbers, no canopy visibility. The design looked intentional. She called it in. Control. This is Raptor 1. Visual confirmed. Bogey appears to be stealth profile. Unknown manufacturer. No response on emergency frequencies. Colonel Whitmore's voice came back sharp. You are cleared to proceed with intercept formation and issue warning. If no response in 60 seconds, fire one burst as visual deterrent. Do not strike to disable unless confirmed hostile. Copy, Elena responded, her voice low. Her thumb hovered just above the master arm switch. She toggled her MFD to weapon status, guns hot, one burst, show of force. 30 seconds passed. No movement from the bogey. It didn't climb. Didn't descend. Didn't attempt to evade. A normal pilot would have banked hard the moment an F-22 moved into view. 10 seconds. Elena inched the Raptor closer, keeping her position off the left wing of the aircraft. The shape reminded her of something. A project file long buried. Angular intakes. V-tail. Canted vertical stabilizers. She'd seen sketches like this back when she was still in test orientation at Eaglin. When Hades' Spectre was a rumor in the classified corridors, she flipped the master arm cover open, finger resting on the switch. 5 seconds. Then the radio crackled. Faint. Garbled at first. But what followed turned her blood cold. Raptor 1, this is Ghost Lead. Stand down. Her hand jerked off the switch. The aircraft wobbled a degree before she corrected. She blinked, looked over at Reeves, who was scanning her with confusion. Repeat, came the voice again. Clearer this time. This is Ghost Lead. Do not engage. She couldn't move. The voice. It was impossible. No call sign in the active registry matched that label. Ghost Lead had been retired, scrubbed from comms protocols after Major Jessica Callahan died in a training incident 3 years ago. At 1622, Zulu. Elena had been there. Reeves pinged her over the private comm. You heard that too, right? Who the hell is Ghost Lead? She didn't answer. Her heart hammered against her ribs, sweat building under her flight gloves. Every pilot knew you didn't freeze in the sky. But this wasn't fear. It was recognition. Her lips moved before she could stop them. That's not possible. Ghost Lead again. Elena, listen to me. You're not supposed to be here. But since you are, I need you to think. Back off. Do not follow their orders. There are things you don't know. She switched channels manually, heart thundering in her ears. This is Captain Elena Monroe. Raptor 1. Identify yourself. This is a restricted frequency. Who are you? The voice came again. Calm. Precise. Ghost Lead. You already know who I am. You just buried the truth. Elena sat in the cockpit of the world's most advanced stealth fighter, cruising above the desert at the edge of classified airspace. and suddenly felt like the smallest person in the world. Control came back on the open channel. Raptor 1, confirm fire sequence. She didn't answer, because the voice on the other end of the call, it belonged to someone who had died 3 years ago. Someone Elena had once called her mentor, and someone the system had erased. She looked out the canopy again, but the bogey didn't move. It just floated there, like a ghost, like Ghost Lead. And for the first time in her career, Captain Elena Monroe didn't know what to do. She first met Major Jessica Callahan on a scorching afternoon at Laughlin Air Force Base. Elena had just been bumped up for T6 Texan 2 solo phase. Her nerves were frayed, her checklist memorized but untested, and her confidence hanging on the edge of every instructor's tone. Ghost didn't bark like the others. She didn't need to. When she stepped into the hangar, the air just shifted. Everyone knew she could outfly half the brass on base and still land smooth, enough to keep the maintenance crew bored. That day, Ghost stood next to the gleaming white and blue trainer jet. Arms crossed, visor down, her voice cut through the engine noise with calm authority. You're flying with me today. Eyes up, chin in. Let's see if you can keep this bird in the sky without embarrassing either of us. And Elena did, barely. She missed a call-out on downwind, slipped too much rudder on final. But she didn't panic, not with Ghost sitting behind her, silent but present. The woman never yelled, never grabbed the stick. Just let Elena fly the edge until she pulled it together. When they touched down, Ghost said nothing until they were walking back to the flight room. You flinch when you don't need to. Trust your training. Trust the aircraft. Then she paused and learned to fly through the noise. That's the job. Elena carried those words like armor. In the years that followed, Ghost became more than an instructor. She was the reason Elena stayed in the program when others washed out. When Elena made it to A-10s, it was Ghost who greeted her at Davis-Monthan, now serving with the 354th Fighter Squadron. Different base, different aircraft, same presence. Elena could still feel that first flight in the Warthog. Her hands stiff, heart pounding, surrounded by dials and muscle memory still forming. Ghost sat beside her during that early ride in the dual control version, calm as ever. You don't win fights with stick moves. You win them with patience, with angles, with grit. Flying with Ghost felt like flying with instinct itself. Her voice was sharp but never cruel. Her debriefs sliced through pride but left room for growth. Elena started flying like her, precise, cold under pressure. But when Ghost cracked a smile, brief, hard-earned, it was like getting a medal. Then it all shattered. It was a systems check flight, routine, nothing dangerous. Elena wasn't in the sky that day, but she heard the comms. Something in Ghost's voice had sounded wrong, distorted, then static, then silence. Command said the bird had gone down in a remote part of the Utah test corridor. Wreckage minimal, flight data unrecoverable, pilot presumed dead. But that wasn't the shock. The shock came days later, when OSI showed up asking questions. Not about the flight, about Ghost, about encrypted systems access, about comms intercepted weeks prior, about why Ghost had pulled a flight record offline 2 months before her crash. Elena was asked to testify in the preliminary inquiry. Her statements were simple at first. Ghost never spoke of politics, never questioned chain of command, never did anything off-book. But the investigators pressed. Did she ever mention disagreements with command? Did she ever express doubt? Did she ever seem paranoid? And in a quiet moment, under the weight of a closed-door session, Elena said something she never forgave herself for. She mentioned the night Ghost came back late from a classified sortie, pale and tight-lipped, mumbling that certain people didn't deserve the tools they held. She didn't mean it. Elena had said she was just angry, tired. It didn't matter. That line ended up in the final report. Ghost's security clearance was listed under irregular review 2 days after the testimony. Then the file went dark. Elena never saw a formal court-martial, never heard of a funeral, just an unofficial word that the investigation had concluded. Cause of crash was attributed to pilot error and unauthorized software access. Everything about it felt wrong. Ghost didn't make mistakes. She didn't crash planes, and she sure as hell didn't go rogue without a reason. Elena requested records later. Was denied. Asked around off the record. Got nothing but silence and sideways glances. After a while, people stopped mentioning Ghost at all, as if saying her name violated some unspoken rule. But Elena remembered every time she slipped into a flight suit, every time she toggled a weapons system, every time she second-guessed a debrief, she heard Ghost's voice fly through the noise. For years, Elena convinced herself she had done the right thing. That duty came before doubt. But when she heard that call sign again in the sky, all the logic fell away. All that was left was the pit in her stomach. and the weight of a decision that never felt clean. She'd buried Ghost once. Now, the past had clawed its way back through classified skies, calling her by name. And this time, Elena didn't know if she had the heart to look away again. The object hung in the sky like it didn't belong to gravity. Elena throttled back just enough to stabilize, maintaining visual lock on the aircraft at 2 o'clock low. Reeves floated slightly behind and right, holding position without speaking. Neither of them had moved in the last 2 minutes. The bogey hadn't either. But now, in the direct light of 1207 Zulu, she saw it clearly. The frame wasn't just stealth, it was unnaturally silent. The fuselage absorbed sunlight without reflection, a matte black finish broken only by a faint trim of what looked like embedded fiber optics, no seams, no heat wash, no intakes. Elena's HUD struggled to track it. Each time the cursor passed near, the system jittered, blinking uncertain returns, as if the aircraft were there, but not, like it was made to confuse even 4th-gen targeting sensors. She inched the F-22 closer, scanning every inch. Delta wing configuration, but cleaner. No visible rudders. No vertical stabilizers. It flew without traditional control surfaces. There were no air-to-air mounts, no visible payload. But something about the underside shimmered with texture. Maybe sensor arrays. Maybe something worse. Then she saw the engines. Or rather, didn't. No exhaust trail, no afterburner signature, no inlet. Just 2 flush panels where jet intakes should be. That didn't make sense. Unless she backed off slightly and switched to FLIR. The heat map made her breath hitch. A plasma distribution grid. Full skin active thermoregulation. It masked its heat signature by blending into ambient air temperature. Live, adaptive, real time. That kind of tech wasn't theoretical. It wasn't experimental. It was impossible. Except it wasn't. She'd seen the schematics once, years ago. Hades' Spectre. A project whispered about at Wright-Patterson and buried under multiple black-level clearances, supposedly canceled during early propulsion trials. The notes had called it an unstable platform, ahead of its time. Too costly, too unmanageable, too autonomous. The file was sealed before she made captain. The prototypes were reportedly disassembled. And yet here it was. Flying, breathing, watching her. She keyed her mic, trying to sound composed. Raptor 1 to control. Possible contact match to scrapped project codenamed Spectre. Recommend reclassification from unidentified to black asset. Please confirm airspace control authority. No reply. Not static, just silence. Then the voice came again. This time, no garble, no distortion. A clear feed into her encrypted channel. Elena, it's me. She didn't answer. You know what this is. You flew beside me once. You know what they built. You saw the plans. They silenced me, but they didn't kill me. She pulled a breath through the oxygen mask, cold sweat gathering at her lower back. I saw your testimony. I don't blame you. That voice, every syllable burned through the years of denial. The flat rhythm, the calm logic wrapped in a near whisper. Jessica Callahan, Ghost. Elena forced her hand to stay steady on the stick. She shifted power slightly, keeping station, trying not to panic. This is Captain Monroe. State your platform ID. Identify yourself under UCMJ protocol. This frequency is restricted. Ghost's reply came slow, low, certain. They told you I was dead, but what they really needed was me quiet. The stealth aircraft began a gentle bank left, away from restricted airspace. Elena instinctively mirrored, still silent, still unsure if she was hallucinating under G-load stress. Behind her, Reeves's voice cracked the formation channel. What the hell is going on? Elena didn't answer. Her eyes locked on the impossible machine in front of her, flying without a name, without a signal, in skies it shouldn't exist in. A ghost from a buried project, flown by a pilot the world declared lost. They erased me, Elena, but not everything. This platform carries the truth. That's why they're coming. As if on cue, her radar blinked. Multiple new contacts, high speed, inbound from northwest vector. Fast movers, transponders showing F-35s, friendlies, but no flight plan filed. High alert, intercept pattern. Elena's pulse surged. If this really was Spectre and Ghost was truly alive, then the real threat wasn't just above her. It was below, on the ground, in the silence of classified corridors and erased records. The aircraft ahead dipped its nose slightly, motionless otherwise. Still no weapons armed, still no threat broadcast. And yet, Elena had never felt this kind of pressure inside a cockpit. Not in combat exercises, not even in combat. What do you want from me? She hadn't meant to say it aloud, but Ghost responded anyway. To remember, because sometimes that's the most dangerous thing you can do in uniform. Elena swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the new blips closing in. Reeves called again. Are we engaging, Elena? What's the call? She didn't know. Only that her world had just split in half. And somewhere between truth and silence, the Ghost had returned. Elena held formation, still trailing the stealth aircraft by a few hundred feet. The desert stretched wide beneath them, endless beige with only the shadow of her Raptor marking time. Reeves had peeled off moments earlier, ordered to recon the incoming vector. Alone now. She listened to a voice that should not exist. You were right to hesitate, Elena. I needed that. You still think like a pilot, not a weapon. The words came through crystal clear on the private channel. No distortion. No interference. No traceable signature. What is this, Elena asked, her tone flat, but her chest tight. What the hell are you flying? Ghost's reply was steady. This isn't just stealth. It's Spectre Tier 2. The original design was never meant to fly combat. It was meant to vanish. The aircraft ahead kept level flight, banking slowly northeast. Elena matched pace, watching the MFD flicker with inconsistent telemetry. Everything about the plane screamed impossible. Everything about Ghost's voice said otherwise. The hull skin masks IR and radar returns, but underneath, it carries something more dangerous. A low-orbit directed EMP payload, not a one-off pulse. Sustained field suppression, enough to disable power grids, servers, towers, or pacemakers within a 30-mile radius. Elena blinked hard. That's not a defensive system. No, it's not. Ghost's tone didn't waver. She sounded like she'd rehearsed this 100 times. Maybe she had. The real project wasn't about aircraft survivability. It was about deniability. Strike without fire. No craters. No bullet holes. Just silence. A blackout. And no one left to trace the cause. Elena felt her stomach shift. Hospitals. Airports. Civilian infrastructure. No warning. No smoke. They called it adaptive deterrence, Ghost said. But they had plans. Testing protocols in zones marked as domestic response drills. False grid overloads. Scheduled outages that weren't accidents. Elena's hands tightened on the controls. She scanned below, half expecting to see the desert floor pulsing with artificial currents. Why didn't you report it? I did. And the next day, I was reassigned. Then I was grounded. Then my flight controls failed over Utah. Her voice dropped, but her words didn't falter. They crashed me. On paper, anyway. That was their idea of closure. Elena's mind raced. Every detail from that year, the classified test flights, the closed hangar rotations, the OSI visit, reframed in seconds. You think I helped them? No, I think you were used, like I was, but now you have to choose what that means. Ghost paused. You testified against me, not out of betrayal, out of belief. But belief requires truth, and they fed you something else. Elena didn't speak. The sky ahead was wide and quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a reckoning. This isn't about me, Ghost added. It never was. This platform was never supposed to leave a lab. They're flying a second one now, and that one doesn't have a pilot. Elena's pulse kicked up. An unmanned version, fully autonomous. No override. If it deploys, the blackout won't just be a test. What do they want? Leverage? Silence? Control? They don't need missiles anymore. Elena, they just need for no one to notice what goes dark. The pieces clicked faster than she could stop them. The scrambled orders, the lack of transponder logs, the F-35s closing in. If she hadn't hesitated, she would have destroyed the only proof still flying. This is treason, she whispered. No, this is the truth. You just have to decide if you still want to fly through it. Elena stared at the impossible aircraft ahead, and for the first time, wondered if she'd been flying on the wrong side of the line all along. The cockpit was quiet, but her headset buzzed with urgency. Colonel Whitmore's voice came sharp, all edge and no room for negotiation. Raptor 1, you are ordered to engage. Target Spectre-class aircraft on bearing 090. Confirm weapons hot and prepare to fire. This is a direct command. Comply immediately. Elena stared straight ahead. The aircraft she was meant to destroy still drifted ahead of her. Calm, motionless, unarmed. It hadn't flinched. Neither had Ghost. Her thumb hovered near the master arm switch. It was already hot. One push, one missile. That was all it would take. For most of her career, orders had been simple, clear. She followed them because they came with structure, purpose, authority. She had built her identity in the tight corridors of the chain of command. When things got messy, she leaned on the system. It was what made her good. But now, Something in her gut resisted. The system wasn't supposed to lie. Her thoughts drifted to the ceremony in Texas. The oath she took as a second lieutenant. Standing in dress blues under the sweltering sun, she'd raised her right hand and promised to defend the Constitution. Not a commander, not a doctrine. The oath was bigger than that. She hadn't understood it then. Not really. She understood now. This wasn't about insubordination. It was about what came after obedience. What she'd have to live with when this mission ended and the paperwork began. She hadn't seen the Spectre engage in hostile behavior. It hadn't locked radar. It hadn't jammed frequencies. It hadn't even tried to flee. All she had was a voice, a shape, and a memory. But that memory had a name. Jessica Callahan. Major. Mentor. Not dead. Not wrong. Her knuckles whitened on the control stick. Protocol screamed at her to obey. Training told her there was no room for doubt at 30,000 feet. But her conscience said something else. You swore to protect against enemies foreign and domestic. She hadn't considered what it meant if that enemy wore the same uniform. Control repeated the order. Last warning. Raptor 1. Failure to comply will be logged as refusal under Article 92. Article 92. Failure to obey a lawful order. The words rang heavy in her ears. But for the first time, she questioned what lawful even meant. If justice was silent, if truth was buried, if integrity required obedience without thought, was that still lawful? She had less than 5 seconds to decide. Her hand dropped from the trigger. She exhaled, calm and final. Then she switched to secure comms and said what no one in her position ever wanted to say, I cannot comply. Silence followed. Not radio static. The kind of silence that changed careers. Elena sat in the cockpit of one of the most advanced fighters in history, knowing she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. But somewhere beneath the weight of it all, she felt the smallest trace of peace, because for the first time, she wasn't just following orders. She was honoring her oath. Elena banked hard, right? Cutting under a ridgeline just north of the Sierra Madre. Her F-22 rattled as the G-forces pressed into her chest. Her radar lit up with search locks. 4 F-35s from Luke AFB were in fast pursuit. Their formation tight and efficient. They weren't flying to warn. They were flying to kill. Time 1411 Zulu. She dropped altitude again, slicing into a ravine with barely 30 feet clearance beneath her fuselage. Her breathing stayed even, controlled through the oxygen mask. Behind her, the Spectre platform tracked every movement, shadowing her like a ghost with wings. Ghost was flying hands-on. That much was clear. No AI flew that clean. Control is compromised, Ghost said over encrypted comms. You've got 2 minutes before they fire. Elena glanced at the digital clock. The window for evasive maneuvering was short. She toggled countermeasure systems and reconfigured flight control for terrain following. Her mind ran hot with decisions. Speed, altitude, radar exposure. She called out, Raptor 1, going low and west, Ridge Alley run. Expect break at Sierra Point 9. Roger, came the clipped voice of Reeves. His F-22 held above her, locked in. She knew he was watching her from above, confused, maybe betrayed. She couldn't afford to slow down. The terrain blurred. Mesas rose and fell like walls. Her HUD pulsed warning after warning. Terrain proximity screaming in the background. She cut throttle. Let gravity pull her tight to the contours of the hills. Ghost followed seamlessly. Elena could feel the difference in her movements. This was muscle memory from someone who had trained where the manuals stopped. Someone who had nothing left to prove but everything left to do. The F-35 stayed high. Smart. At first. But as she dipped west and ducked under a sandstone cliff, they began to descend. Weapons hot. Elena's RWR chirped. Lock on ping. She rolled left, yanked the stick, pushed down under an arching ridge and dumped flares in sequence. The heat signature distraction worked. 1 missile overshot. Lost in the thermal wash against desert stone. Still 3 to go. 1412 Zulu. Raptor 2. Disengage now, she called out. Reeves didn't answer at first. Then came his voice, low and deliberate. What the hell are you doing, Elena? Her answer was quick. I'm doing what I swore. I need you to trust me. A pause. Then a soft click on the private frequency. He'd opened the emergency encryption channel. Received. Say again your vector. Northwest. Skimming through the devil's spine. We're 3 minutes from cover if we make the narrows. Roger that. Moving to trail position. 1 click back. Elena let out a tight breath. He was coming. She banked left with precision, barely clearing the rock shelf. Her F-22 tore through the tight canyon. Below her, dry brush flared in the jet wash. Behind the Spectre platform never broke formation. Ghost matched her angles. Even as the canyon floor tilted under a sudden shift in topography, the F-35s kept pressure, But now, one peeled off, probably to reposition. One was gaining altitude for a higher shot. She couldn't let them get above. She keyed comms again. "Reeves, you've got 60 seconds. Break high, draw one off." "Copy." Popping vertical. His Raptor flared skyward, afterburners lit. The F-35 on intercept turned to meet him. Baited. One threat off Elena's 6. She and Ghost turned right, slipping through the tightest line of the Narrows. Altitude 480 feet AGL. Speed Mach 0.9. Time 14:13 Zulu. The last two F-35s still hunted close. One fired. Heat-seeking. Elena jinked low. Cut thrust just long enough to let the missile lose its heat trace in the rocks. Then she throttled back to full and rolled left. Missile missed. The canyon saved her. Reeves came back on 2 bogeys left. "You've got cover ahead. They won't follow into the draw. Orders or not." Then a pause. His voice quieter. "They're not flying for us anymore, are they?" "No, they're not." Elena and Ghost passed into a tight ridge pass, narrow enough to force even her to ease off throttle. No way the F-35s could follow, not without tearing a wing. Reeves looped wide and dropped back in beside her. Time 14:15 Zulu. 3 aircraft, 1 path forward. The comms went quiet, but for the first time in hours. Elena felt a flicker of belief, not just in herself, in the ones still flying beside her. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was a choice, and they had made it. Elena steadied her breath as her right hand hovered over the ComSec override. Panel. The code wasn't standard pilot issue. Protocol Echo Shield was buried deep in the encryption suite, reserved for situations where the chain of command was compromised and immediate oversight was required. She had never seen it used. Most officers never even acknowledged it existed. Time 14:18 Zulu. She input the first authorization sequence. Voice authentication engaged. Her voice stayed level. "Captain Elena Monroe. Clearance code Raptor Echo 2917. Initiating Protocol Echo Shield under Title 50, Section 3093. The HUD dimmed for a second. Her radio cut for half a breath, then reconnected with a layered tone. The signal duplicated across 5 military uplink satellites. Redundant relay nodes forwarded the transmission simultaneously to the Defense Intelligence Oversight Committee, the Department of the Air Force Inspector General, and 2 civilian contractors tied to audit compliance at the Pentagon. The final prompt flashed, "Echo Shield active, secure relay open." All communications recorded and distributed under full audit conditions. Then came the last step, confirm emergency declaration. Under Whistleblower Directive 42A, any order to engage the whistleblower after activation is a direct violation of U.S. Code and carries criminal penalty under UCMJ Article 90. She hit confirm. An encrypted sub-channel opened. Every aircraft in the operation received a signal burst. Within seconds, the airwaves shifted. The 4 F-35s had maintained aggressive posture just moments before, but now their lock-ons vanished. Radar painting ceased. Targeting systems dropped back into passive. The change was instant. No orders needed. Every pilot in that sky knew what had just been activated. No one dared fire under Echo Shield, because now every word, every command, every electronic movement was being recorded, duplicated, and time-stamped across a dozen secure servers, stored not only in military servers, but also piped into third-party archives tied to congressional oversight. Any attempt to interfere was a matter of national accountability. This was not defiance. This was the Constitution in motion. Elena didn't speak again for a moment. Her pulse stayed steady. Her hands didn't shake. She monitored her radar, watched the F-35s widen their formation. They weren't retreating. They were standing off, waiting. Across the channel, Reeves came on quietly. "That was real. You just did it." She replied just as calm. "I had no other option." Ghost was right. This isn't tactical anymore. It's systemic. A long pause. Then Reeves said what she already knew. "You're not coming back from this, are you?" She didn't answer. Because some actions don't need explanations. They need witnesses. And now the entire sky was listening. Time 14:20 Zulu. Elena's comms had gone silent after Echo Shield activation. No more orders. No scrambling. Just radio quiet stretched thin between the roar of jet engines and the heavy waiting that filled every pilot's headset. Then the override channel lit up. "This is General Donna Briggs, Commander. Joint Interregional Operations Command. All units stand by for instruction." Her voice cut through the frequency with crisp clarity. Elena hadn't heard it in nearly 2 years. She'd flown under Briggs once, during integrated exercises off the coast of Florida. The general didn't speak often. When she did, no one interrupted. Effective immediately. "All active commands from Colonel Brad Whitmore are suspended pending review." Under UCMJ Article 92 and Title 10, Section 164, command authority is now transferred under GROC Regulation Alpha 59. Across the board, radar pings from the F-35s blinked off. Formation logic shifted. No more intercept vectors, no weapon locks, no aggressive telemetry. The net dropped from red to amber. Escort pattern. Monroe, you are to maintain current course and altitude. Spectre-class aircraft will not be engaged. Full record under Protocol Echo Shield is in review. All actions are now monitored under Joint Oversight Protocol and Inspector. General Chain, stand by for further coordination. The entire sky held its breath. Briggs continued, her tone iron flat. Any officer issuing engagement orders after this override will be subject to investigation under Article 88 and immediate command recall. No one spoke. In a control tower somewhere, phones were ringing, flags were rising, lawyers were waking up. But in the air, at 23,000 feet, the battlefield turned cold. Elena switched to secure reply. Acknowledged, ma'am. Holding present vector, awaiting coordination. Briggs paused. Then her voice softened slightly. You did the right thing, Captain. Keep your formation tight. I've got you. That was all she said. The override tone cut out. The airwaves returned to operational frequency. Elena glanced at her HUD. The 4 F-35s held back at 1 mile trail. Passive escort. They weren't alone anymore. Reeves chimed in low on the private band. That voice still scares the hell out of me. Elena didn't laugh, but for the first time in hours, her shoulders eased slightly. They'd bought space, not safety, not victory, but breathing room. And that, in a fight like this, was everything. Time 16:03 Zulu. The tarmac shimmered under late sun as Elena taxied the Raptor into final position. The base was undisclosed, out past the northern range near Fallon. No press, no briefing room, just hardened shelters, desert wind, and silence. Reeves landed 2 minutes behind her. The Spectre touched down last. The ground crew didn't ask questions. They knew not to. Ghost disembarked without hesitation, helmet tucked under one arm. Her face was drawn but steady. Time hadn't broken her. It had refined her. She carried a hardened transport case, military issue. Its biometric lock blinked red until her fingerprint and retina cleared it. Then green. Inside 3 drives, 2 notebooks, and a sealed data link device. Elena watched the handoff. An officer from Defense Oversight received the case directly. No chain of custody delay. No logs to disappear. It went straight into a vault transport. Dual signature. 1 civilian, 1 military. Everything recorded. No one said much. They didn't need to. Ghost turned and nodded once to Elena. Not thanks. Not farewell. Just a silent contract sealed between two who knew what had almost been lost. By 1745 Zulu, Elena was in debrief with Joint Intel. The room was plain, no decorations, no insignias. Just a recorder, a folder, and 3 observers. 1 legal, 1 from the Inspector General's office, and 1 from Congressional Liaison. She spoke clearly. No emotion, no flair. She recounted the mission from the start. The scramble order. The call sign that shouldn't exist. The encrypted signal from Ghost. The chase. The override. And finally, the protocol she activated. Then came the part she hadn't rehearsed. She told them about the testimony 3 years ago. She had trusted what they gave her. Simulations, briefings, flight telemetry they said was redacted for security. They told her Jessica had ignored procedure, that she had broken lockstep with operational doctrine, that she had been a risk to national safety. Elena believed them, because that's what soldiers do. But what she hadn't known then, what she knew now, was how they had shaped the narrative, isolated one report, suppressed another. The simulation they showed her was cropped. One of Ghost's encrypted cockpit logs had never been submitted. Her voice didn't break. It didn't need to. The weight came from its steadiness. By 20 Unur Zulu, multiple agencies had been notified. Congressional Oversight opened a full inquiry. The Armed Services Committee issued a quiet summons. A sealed hearing was scheduled within 48 hours. Elena wasn't arrested. She wasn't praised either. What she was heard. The fallout came in waves. Colonel Whitmore was placed on leave pending investigation. Civilian contractors tied to the Spectre project were subpoenaed. And most importantly, the Spectre program's reclassification was halted. All testing suspended, all assets grounded. That night, Elena sat alone in a barracks room built for temporary staff. She had flown hundreds of hours in classified airspace. She had trained under the best, and for a long time, she had believed that loyalty meant never looking away. Now, she knew different. Sometimes loyalty meant saying no, not out of disobedience, but out of duty to something bigger. Outside her window, the night air was still clean, untouched by the noise of politics or command structures. She closed her eyes. not because she was at peace, but because for the first time in years, she no longer felt lost in someone else's war. This one, she had chosen, and it was worth it. Time 10:30 Zulu. The ceremony was held on a quiet stretch of the National Defense Hall, far from the usual media glare. The room carried the silence of reverence, not absence. Rows of uniformed service members stood at ease, eyes forward, beneath the muted banners of each military branch. Elena Monroe stood still in her dress blues, cap tucked beneath her arm. Ghost was beside her, the silver oak leaf back on her shoulder after years stripped of it. Maverick held no medals on his chest yet, just the glint of flight wings and a posture that didn't waver. The general who spoke kept it brief. He didn't speak of politics or scandal, just decisions made under pressure, integrity preserved when it cost the most. He mentioned only facts read with calm authority. And then, with formal cadence, came the citations. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepid action under conditions of extreme uncertainty, Captain Elena Monroe is awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Her judgment in the face of conflict prevented the misuse of force and safeguarded both lives and national trust. There was no applause, just the soft click of a camera and the sound of boots shifting weight. Major Jessica Callahan was reinstated officially that morning. Her record was cleared, her name restored, her citation acknowledged not just her flying skill, but her refusal to carry out operations that violated ethical use of force. The phrase civilian integrity appeared 3 times in the document. Then came Maverick. His was the simplest commendation. Recognition for timely loyalty and operational restraint. The medal wasn't flashy, but the moment he saluted and accepted it, Elena caught something in his eyes she hadn't seen since their early training. Peace. Afterward, no one spoke much. The 3 of them stood on the edge of the dais, medals pinned, hands at ease. No cameras, no press interviews, just their breath in the morning air and the sound of wind catching the flag. Behind them, Ghost didn't smile, but she didn't have to. Elena looked out at the rows of uniforms and caught a glance from General Briggs. It wasn't approval, it was something rarer. Quiet acknowledgement, like a weight finally lifted from the system itself. When the anthem ended, they stepped off the platform together. No speeches, no parade. Just 3 pilots walking back down granite steps. Seen, named, and, at last, forgiven. That was enough. Time 07:46 Zulu. The morning air at the test wing facility was clean, just cool enough to see your breath. Hangar 4 stood wide open, revealing 3 new Spectre variants under tarp. The place had once been dormant. Now it carried the hum of purpose. Jessica Callahan stood in front of a short formation of 6 young pilots, each barely out of advanced flight training. No ribbons yet, no ego, just sharp uniforms and eyes that had seen enough to listen. Behind them stood Elena Monroe, clipboard in hand, newly reinstated with her own set of wings, this time with a different weight. Maverick Reeves leaned casually against the side of a tow cart, helmet under his arm. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Jessica gave them only a few words. This squadron will fly on principle. We test not just aircraft, but the culture that commands them. If you're here to follow orders blindly, this isn't your unit. No one moved. One of the younger pilots shifted her stance just slightly, posture tightening. That was all the answer Jessica needed. Elena stepped forward, offering each of them a small nod. She wasn't the captain from the Raptor cockpit anymore. She was the kind of leader she used to look for. Steady, present, unshaken by politics. The roster had been selected not just for skill, but character. Each had passed an additional interview. One about ethical judgment, not kill scores. They weren't here because they'd been the loudest. They were here because they had questions and didn't fear the answers. They moved toward the tarmac as a group, no ceremony, just helmets clipped, flight suits sealed, and boots tapping in rhythm across the concrete. Sunlight crept low behind the hangars, casting long shadows. The Spectres waited, still cloaked, engines silent, but the sense of motion was already there. Jessica walked ahead, Elena at her right, Reeves flanking left. The junior pilots followed in a line that wasn't rigid, but tight enough to show respect. It wasn't a triumphant march. No one cheered. There was no music. Just the quiet certainty of people who knew what they were stepping into, and chose it anyway. At the edge of the runway, the wind picked up. Elena looked toward the horizon, and for the first time since the call sign Ghost had returned to the airwaves, she smiled. Not because the war was over, but because they were finally building something worth protecting. Time 18:02 Zulu. The air at altitude always felt thinner in the late hours. Not because of pressure, just silence. The kind of silence that made a cockpit feel like the only place on Earth. Elena flew lead today, 5 others in formation, steady on her wing, and yet she had never felt more alone, in the best way. The Spectre handled like memory, smooth, quiet, obedient until it challenged you. She eased the throttle. The heads-up display glowed pale green, reflecting softly off her visor. Below, the desert rolled on forever, lit gold by the setting sun. She remembered this view from her first solo flight. Only back then, she didn't know what questions to ask. There's something no one tells you when you raise your right hand and take the oath. They train you how to follow orders, how to read weather, how to keep airspeed clean on approach. But no one prepares you for that moment. One day, maybe far ahead, when doing the right thing means breaking with the very system that taught you how to serve. She had lived that moment, 30,000 feet above the desert, finger on the trigger, knowing the voice in her ear wasn't just from a friend. It was from a truth the system tried to erase. And still, for 3 full seconds, she had hesitated. Those 3 seconds taught her more than any simulation ever could. Elena banked slightly left. Her wingmen followed, tight, disciplined, young. But they believed in what they were building now, not because someone ordered them to, because they chose it. In that cockpit, her hands moved automatically. Check throttle, scan left, confirm heading. But her thoughts drifted. Not with regret, not with shame, just clarity. She thought of Ghost, of the years lost, of the risk it took to speak when silence was safer. She thought of Maverick, who could have just followed orders like everyone else, but didn't. She thought of herself, not the pilot, not the rank, but the woman who once said nothing when she should have, and then finally did. The truth wasn't a lightning bolt. It didn't strike clean. It crept in over time, through doubt, through fear, through the slow realization that loyalty isn't about obedience, it's about judgment, and judgment comes with a cost. Elena adjusted trim slightly. Smooth flight, sunset to the west. She had worn a uniform for nearly a decade, served with distinction, and only now did she feel like she truly understood what service meant. It wasn't medals, it wasn't clearance levels or standing ovations. It was showing up, choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Even when your voice shakes, even when you fly alone, especially then. Because real honor doesn't live in orders. It lives in the quiet moments after, when the sky is calm, when no one's watching, and you still choose to do the right thing.